Why were you not appreciated before 1966?
I thought I was.
By the time you get actual winning of it, are you sort of numb? You are.
Your name isn't called, and I don't know what that is.
Lee Marvin was a tough Hollywood star. He used to be a Marine who got hurt in Saipan and was known his whole life for being very honest and direct. This man who always cared about the truth suddenly shared a surprising list near the end of his life. It was 7 actors he thought were the most cruel during Hollywood's best years. One of them had built an image as a brave soldier, but it turned out he did everything he could to avoid going to World War II. Another bragged about sleeping with more than 1,000 women and treated them just as toys for fun. There was even a famous person known for being faithful and loving, but in real life he had affairs openly and forced a girlfriend to get an illegal abortion. So who were these 7 people, and why did Lee Marvin only feel safe to talk about them when he was close to dying? Chapter 1. John Wayne, the fake hero who avoided World War II duty. In the 1940s, when America was fighting in World War II, newspapers were full of pictures showing young men standing in line in New York or Los Angeles to join the military. James Stewart left his Hollywood fame behind to fly bomber planes for the U.S. Air Force. Clark Gable joined up after his wife, Carol Lombard, died in a plane crash during a military fundraising trip. Even Henry Fonda put on a Navy uniform and left the movie studio. But while Hollywood gave everything to the war, John Wayne took a different road and found every excuse not to go to the front lines. Papers released by the Los Angeles Times in 1943 showed that Wayne asked many times to delay his service, saying he had family problems and a movie career he couldn't stop. Republic Pictures, the studio that had Wayne's contract, was said to have quietly asked the government to let him skip service. Harold Stone, who used to work as an assistant producer, remembered seeing a message sent to the War Department that clearly said, if John Wayne gets drafted, the studio will lose millions of dollars. What made people most angry was how Wayne used the war to make himself look better. While his colleagues lived in bunkers in Normandy or camps in the Pacific, Wayne signed big-money contracts. Stagecoach had made him a star, but war movies turned him into America's hero face. Movies like Flying Tigers from 1942 and Back to Bataan from 1945 showed him as a brave soldier, even though he never went to a real battlefield. Lee Marvin, who had been shot at Saipan, thought this was a betrayal. In a 1965 interview with New York Times reporter Michael O'Connor, he said, "I saw Wayne in uniform on screen, and it made my blood boil. I was lying in a Navy hospital for over a year with a bullet wound, while he became the nation's hero. I can't respect a man like that." Besides avoiding war, Wayne was known for saying things that divided people. In the 1960s, when people were protesting the war and fighting for civil rights, Wayne took the side of extreme conservatives. In a 1971 Playboy interview, he said Native Americans couldn't keep their land, so white people had the right to take it. He also said he didn't think African Americans were ready to be treated as equals. Words like these made people furious and pushed away his coworkers. On movie sets, Wayne also caused problems. In 1956, while making The Searchers, Mexican actress Dolores Del Rio said he often made fun of her background using rude words. Critic Richard Schickel later wrote in Time magazine that Wayne forced young actresses to sign unfair contracts and threatened to cut their parts if they didn't. Another disturbing case happened during The Conqueror in 1956. Even though people warned about filming in Utah near a place where they tested nuclear bombs, Wayne kept going. Later, dozens of crew members got cancer, including Wayne himself. Many people believed he knew about the dangers, but stayed quiet to keep the production going. From avoiding military service and making money off war to saying racist things, Wayne's real image was very different from what he showed on screen. To Marvin, he was a fake who made himself look good at other people's expense. Chapter 2. Frank Sinatra, the arrogant star with dark connections. In the mid-1940s, just as America was coming out of World War II, music became wildly popular. On stages from New York to Chicago, a warm voice and bright blue eyes made crowds of young women scream and faint. People called it the Sinatra craze. But behind the charming image was the shadow of powerful Italian-American mafia members who used Sinatra's fame to hide money laundering, smuggling, and control in Hollywood. Sinatra was closely connected with well-known mob bosses like Lucky Luciano, Sam Giancana, and Carlo Gambino. At that time, Las Vegas was becoming a gambling hotspot. The mob put money into hotels and casinos, and they needed a star to bring in middle-class Americans. Sinatra was perfect. Through his shows at the Sands Hotel or Tropicana, millions of dollars were made. A secret 1977 FBI report showed how envelopes filled with cash were given to Sinatra after his performances and then sent back into Giancana's bank accounts. He wasn't just a front. He was supposedly involved directly. In 1952, Italian police found suitcases of illegal goods that flew on Sinatra's private jet with the label musical instruments. Young singer Joey Russo, who got caught in the plan, was arrested and his career was ruined, while Sinatra got away because mafia lawyers arranged a fake diplomatic pass. Russo disappeared from the business. Sinatra kept performing at Madison Square Garden like nothing happened. His personal life was just as messy. His marriage to Ava Gardner, once called perfect, was full of violence and jealousy. In 1953, at the Beverly Hills Hotel, Sinatra threw a bottle at the wall after seeing Gardner talking to director John Huston. A waiter later told the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner that Ava was crying, while Frank yelled that he would destroy the career of anyone who took her away. Gardner later admitted in her diary that she lived in constant fear during his angry outbursts. Sinatra was also rumored to have forced a young actress to get an abortion. Reporter Shirley DeAngelo hinted at this in a 1964 Variety article, mentioning a promising young actress whose future was destroyed after getting involved with Frank. Her name stayed secret, but many think she had been working for MGM before disappearing from Hollywood. Sinatra's temper also affected reporters. In 1957, at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami, he hit a Miami Herald reporter for asking about mafia rumors. Even though many people reported this story, it was quickly buried because of mob pressure. Co-workers said they avoided him, not because he lacked talent, but because he messed up productions by showing up late, leaving early, and forcing crews to work around him. Lee Marvin hated this kind of arrogance. At a 1966 Palm Springs party, Sinatra showed up almost 2 hours late, stayed for 15 minutes, and left. Marvin whispered to a friend, "He lives off the shadows behind him, not his voice. I'll never respect a man like that." Sinatra's secrets showed how Golden Age Hollywood was shaped not just by talent, but also by mafia hands pulling strings. A golden voice could erase any wrong, while victims disappeared into silence. Chapter 3. Tony Curtis, the Playboy Prince, is addicted and empty. In the 1950s, when Hollywood wanted a handsome rival to Marlon Brando and James Dean, Tony Curtis came in strong. With his good looks, perfect body, and bright smile, Curtis was called Hollywood's prince. Studios treated him like a money-making machine, and the press called him the charmer of every eye. But behind the glamour was a life full of scandals that Lee Marvin mockingly called a walking doll. Curtis bragged openly that he had been with over 1,000 women. His romantic relationships went from A-list stars to unknown girls. His first marriage to Janet Leigh seemed like a dream, and people called them a golden couple. But behind the shiny Life magazine covers, Leigh often suffered quietly. In 1960, while filming Spartacus, Curtis was caught with Christine Kaufman, who was nearly 20 years younger than him. The news exploded, and his marriage ended 2 years later. Curtis then married Christine Kaufman when she was just 18, even though people were outraged. The New York Times called it the most shocking Hollywood marriage of the 1960s. Soon, Kaufman left him, leaving 2 children behind. His third wife, actress Leslie Allen, also left because of his constant affairs. By the 1970s, rumors spread that Curtis traded movie roles for romantic relationships with young women, destroying many rising careers. One of the biggest scandals happened in 1982 in Las Vegas. The Chicago Tribune reported that Curtis had been with an 18-year-old actress when he was in his 50s. People were outraged, but Curtis escaped punishment thanks to powerful lawyers and hidden connections. The girl vanished from Hollywood soon after. Curtis also fell deep into drug and alcohol use. In the 1970s, during disco parties with alcohol and drugs, he was a regular on the Sunset Strip. In 1974, the Lepka crew stopped production for 3 days because Curtis disappeared on a drinking binge in New York. A crew member told the Los Angeles Times he came to set looking beaten up, forgetting his lines, and unable to stand straight. But studios protected him as long as he sold tickets. Later in life, sickness hit. Curtis developed a serious lung disease, looked weak, and had to carry an oxygen tank. Photos of him in Las Vegas showed no sign of the once glorious idol. Still, rumors continued that he chased women decades younger, making his image worse. Lee Marvin hated Curtis's show-off behavior. At a Beverly Hills party, when Curtis bragged about his conquests, Marvin sneered, "He's just a product of Hollywood's shiny outside, empty inside." The two even fought publicly in 1968 at a charity event. Curtis arrived drunk and late. Marvin stormed out later, telling Variety, "I can't share a stage with someone who treats the audience like a joke." To Marvin, Tony Curtis showed Hollywood's decay, where good looks could hide cheating and addiction was ignored as long as box office money kept coming in. Chapter 4. Yul Brynner, the power-hungry king who grabbed the spotlight at any cost. One of Hollywood's most famous fights in the 1960s didn't happen on a set, but at a charity event in Los Angeles in 1964. The event was to support World War II veterans and was filled with stars. Lee Marvin himself, a wounded veteran, was invited to speak about sacrifice. But as he walked onto the stage, Yul Brynner suddenly took the microphone to promote his new film. Marvin angrily slammed his glass down, and the hall went silent. The next day, the Los Angeles Times headline read, "Marvin and Brynner, 2 stars, 1 stage, 1 explosion." From then on, their hate was no longer just a rumor. In the business, Brynner was known for his obsession with being in control. On the set of The Magnificent Seven in 1960, he demanded that director John Sturges always focus on him. When Steve McQueen got attention with small gestures, Brynner supposedly spread harmful rumors about McQueen's wild lifestyle. Richard Harris later claimed Brynner even made up stories to steal roles, leaving Harris embarrassed and pushed aside. His private life was just as messy. In 1961, he was seen in Paris with both Marlene Dietrich and a young dancer at the same time. The scandal ended with a public fight between the 2 women, while Brynner walked away like nothing had happened. The New York Post called him a shameless collector of affairs. He was also rumored to have questionable relationships with much younger actresses, whispered about but rarely written down. What shocked many people most was his contradiction. After being told he had lung cancer, Brynner led a big anti-smoking campaign in 1985, famously saying, "Don't smoke like I did." But people who worked closely with him said he never quit and often smoked more than the whole crew combined. A makeup artist on the 10 Commandments remembered he could smoke 3 cigarettes in a row, then step under the lights to lecture about quitting. Lee Marvin had no patience for this two-faced behavior. He told Variety he doesn't act, he just waits for the spotlight to shine on his bald head. Going on TV preaching about quitting while smoking backstage, that's his true self. Brynner died in 1985, and audiences mourned him. But for many in the business, his death closed a chapter of Hollywood that was as dark as it was bright. Chapter 5. Charles Bronson, the cold man known as the most unpleasant in Hollywood. Lee Marvin once bluntly told a Variety reporter in 1971, "Working with Charles Bronson is like talking to a wall, but at least a wall stays quiet. He gives off an energy that suffocates the whole crew." That line was later quoted everywhere and became one of Marvin's sharpest insults toward a co-worker. Bronson, the familiar face of the Death Wish series, was remembered by audiences as the symbol of toughness. But inside the business, he was known as the most unpleasant man in Hollywood. The Los Angeles Times even wrote an article in 1980 giving him that exact label. The reason wasn't just his temper, but also a series of personal scandals that left many people shaking their heads. It started with his marriage. Bronson married actress Jill Ireland in 1968, and the press at first called them Hollywood's iron couple. But the truth was different. Ireland later said in a private talk with Michael Caine that Bronson was extremely jealous, watching every phone call and trip outside. Neighbors in Bel Air often heard yelling and things breaking. Rumors said Ireland was even hit by Bronson at a Beverly Hills party just for smiling at another male co-worker. Their bitter relationship ended in a loud divorce that the press described as a battle scene worthy of one of Bronson's films. On set, his temper scared crews. During the filming of The Dirty Dozen in 1967, Bronson once threatened to hit a lighting technician who accidentally pointed a spotlight the wrong way. A crew member told Hollywood Reporter he grabbed the man by the collar and said only the light was allowed to shine on him, no one else. Bronson was also accused of being prejudiced. In 1974, while filming Breakout, he reportedly refused to act with a Mexican actor, saying, "The audience comes to see me, not them." The New York Post published the remarks, making people in the Latin community angry, but Bronson didn't seem to care. Politically, Bronson also caused criticism. In the 1970s, as anti-war protests grew, he publicly supported tough actions, even saying at a Chicago press conference, "We need an iron hand to restore order, not weak chants in the streets." While some conservative groups clapped, many in the business stayed away from him. For Marvin, who had lived through real combat, Bronson's coldness and lack of care for others were too much. While filming The Dirty Dozen, Marvin tried to be friendly in conversations, but Bronson replied with cold stares, and once said, "I don't need friends here." From then on, Marvin saw him as having no soul, and often criticized him openly. One director told CBS Evening News, "Bronson doesn't need to yell or break things. He just sits still, and the whole crew feels choked by pressure." That scary presence, combined with his stormy private life, made Bronson a figure not just Marvin, but much of Hollywood looked at with worry. Chapter 6. Robert Mitchum, the rebel actor, drowned in alcohol and scandals. On the night of September 1, 1948, Los Angeles police raided 8443 Ridpath Drive in Laurel Canyon, a house known for all-night parties. Inside, Robert Mitchum, then one of Hollywood's brightest rising stars, was caught along with actress Leela Leeds and two men. The next morning, newspapers went wild. The Los Angeles Times front page showed Mitchum being led away with his head down, still holding a cigarette. It was called Hollywood's first major scandal, because at the time, movies were still seen as pure and perfect. Mitchum had just become famous with Out of the Past in 1947. People expected him to become America's post-war male icon. His arrest shocked the nation. The New York Daily News called it a betrayal of a hero, while Time magazine wrote, "If Mitchum can fall, then Hollywood is no longer sacred." Mitchum is sentenced to 60 days in Los Angeles County Jail. Photos of him in prison clothes, eating with other inmates, were burned into public memory. Even though RKO Studios tried to fix his image, calling him a victim of a morality witch hunt, the stain never went away. It marked Hollywood's first big scandal of its kind, showing the darker truths behind the silver screen. Beyond that, Mitchum was known for his drinking. He often showed up on set drunk. During River of No Return in 1954, director Otto Preminger had to stop filming repeatedly because Mitchum fell asleep in front of the camera. Co-workers said he could drink 2 bottles of whiskey before filming. Variety in 1955 described him as an actor fueled more by alcohol than script. His careless attitude made the directors furious. In Not as a Stranger in 1955, working alongside Marvin, he made fun of Stanley Kramer as a moral teacher. Marvin, who took acting seriously, felt insulted watching Mitchum treat filmmaking as a joke. The two clashed, and Marvin publicly called Mitchum lazy and disrespectful to audiences. Mitchum's words off-screen also caused problems. In a 1969 Esquire interview, he made rude remarks toward minorities and mocked civil rights movements. The comments were quickly edited in print, but the damage was done. To many, he was not only reckless, but outdated and insensitive. Politically, Mitchum again went against the grain. In the 1960s, when anti-war feelings spread, he openly supported the U.S. military presence in Vietnam. At a 1967 Chicago press event, he declared, "We must crush disorder with an iron hand," broadcast on CBS. The words made left-leaning artists angry, including Marvin, who had first-hand combat experience. To Marvin, Mitchum showed off opinions without understanding how brutal war really was. His marriage to Dorothy Spence also had dark rumors. Hollywood Confidential hinted at home problems, though studios buried the stories. Publicly, he was painted as a rebellious but charming man. But behind the curtain lay alcohol, chaos, and loss of control. Marvin's judgment was harsh. A soldier never falls asleep in battle. An actor shouldn't fall asleep on set. But for Mitchum, it was routine. That summed up why Marvin put Mitchum on his blacklist as someone betraying the craft itself. Despite continued success, Mitchum's legacy forever carried that contradiction. Loved by audiences, but among peers, remembered as a disruptive person.
Chapter 7. Telly Savalas, the peacock who loved the spotlight more than acting. By the late 1960s, Hollywood was booming with big war films. One of them was The Dirty Dozen from 1967, now a classic. But behind the camera, it was also the stage for one of Hollywood's most famous fights, Lee Marvin versus Telly Savalas. From the start of filming in England, Savalas annoyed the crew with strange demands. He insisted that the lighting be adjusted so his bald head shone perfectly. According to The Hollywood Reporter in 1967, the crew lost nearly 40 minutes each morning just to satisfy him. He also demanded the camera shots favor his face, even in scenes meant for other people. When reminded about fairness, he snapped, "Audiences pay to see me, not nobodies." His vanity went beyond the set. At London's Dorchester Hotel, he often threw parties, insisting staff call him Mr. Kojak even before the Kojak series existed. A waiter told the Daily Mail, "He walked in like a king, and we were all just servants to his play." At home, his ego caused harm. In a 1974 Los Angeles Times interview, his ex-wife said he controlled even the smallest details, from meals to how their children greeted friends. She bitterly said, "We didn't live as a family, but as unwilling spectators in his endless show." Tensions with Marvin reached a breaking point during a barracks scene in The Dirty Dozen. Savalas deliberately stepped into a camera angle reserved for Marvin, stealing the close-up. Furious, Marvin stormed off set, shouting, "This is a war film, not a contest for who shines the most. Filming stopped and security was added to prevent a fight between the two. Savalas's fights weren't limited to Marvin. On Kojak in 1973, he often forced script rewrites to give his character heroic speeches and grand rescues. A writer told Variety he didn't care about the story, only whether he looked impressive enough. Another controversy came about with Capricorn 1 in 1978. When a young actor accidentally stood in the wrong spot, Savalas barked, "You don't deserve to share the frame with me." The New York Post reported the insult, making people angry, but Savalas brushed it off as media tricks. Later, Marvin admitted in a CBS Evening News interview, "I fought real battles, faced real bullets, but rarely met someone who made me want to explode like Telly Savalas. He was so self-absorbed. He saw all of us as mere background." To Marvin, Savalas wasn't a star, but a peacock showing off his feathers under the lights instead of relying on real acting. And thus Savalas became the final name on Marvin's blacklist. 7 Hollywood legends stripped bare as symbols of vanity, power, and darkness. Hollywood's golden age is always remembered as the land of legends. Yet through Lee Marvin's words, we see that behind the glory lay shadows, pretenses, ego, scandals, and secrets never meant to be revealed. His 7 names shocked not just because of who they were, but because they forced us to ask how many of yesterday's idols truly deserved their pedestal. And you, after hearing the full story, who do you think was the most outrageous figure? Leave your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss more untold secrets from Hollywood's backstage.